Hello everyone, I'm Literary Freak 11 and this is Enchantment and Evolution, where we talk about science and magic and how they come together and how they clash. And today we're going to be talking about vampires. Vampires have a range of habits known to people and traits, and so we're kind of going to go through and talk about some of the basic traits of vampires, what's true and what's not. So, 1. Turning into bats. False. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed, which means that they would have to have a way of transporting the rest of their mass while they're a bat, because it can't just disappear. So they would really, if they could transform, if anything could transform, in fact, they would probably have to transform into something of equal mass. So they probably couldn't fly, even if the rest of their mass was like invisible and they were kind of just lugging it around. Sunlight will kill them. Mostly false. I think that something like the vampire diet and physiology is likely to prevent them from processing vitamins due to the sun. So sun might make them sick. It might make them, like, if you were to eat only bread for 2 straight weeks, that's probably how they'd feel after a couple hours in the sun. They wouldn't be able to really be in the sun for long periods of time, but I don't think they're intolerant to it. I don't think they'll blister or explode or any of that. Also, while some animals can be iridescent or glow in the dark, glittering is totally out of the question. 3. The cessation of a heartbeat. So, somewhat true. I think that their resting heartbeat might be significantly lower than a human, say 10 beats per minute, as referenced in iZombie. In fact, I know we're not talking about zombies, but that's a very good point, that they don't necessarily have to be completely dead, they just might have a lower resting heart rate. On the other hand, this will allow them to bleed out much slower, which I'll get to in the next point. 4. Immortality. So, mostly true. We see the slow circulation of blood. That would mean injuries would clot faster, and they wouldn't bleed out as quickly. And of course, cutting off their head and fire should work efficiently for killing them. Stabbing them in the heart probably would also, because as we discussed before, they would have a heartbeat. Now, there are adaptations that will make them better able to survive, as well as drinking blood. Because if you think about it, if they have a way to integrate other people's antibodies into their own system, that would also make them immune to most diseases. The slow blood flow means that they probably couldn't make very many antibodies of their own, or at least not do it efficiently. So not only should they get their antibodies from blood because it's advantageous, but I don't think they can make their own. However, if you have a sampling from a large group of people, I think it's much better than, whatever your own body can make. The other thing is about their slowed body processes means that their cells reproduce less often, especially because they eat less often. So think about how often the cells in your digestive tract must get replaced. In your throat, it's every couple of days. In your stomach, it's just a few hours. If they're only eating once every, 3 days to a week, that would mean that all of those cells get replaced less frequently, which prevents telomere shortening. Telomeres are basically those little aglets on your shoelaces, but for genetics, so they prevent the rest from unraveling. As you get older, the more your cells reproduce, the shorter your telomeres get, and this is what causes a lot of problems in old age. This is essentially, what causes aging. Because their body moves slowly, they don't reproduce cells as much, that they're also prevented from dying of old age. 5. A vampire's body is frozen in time. Mostly false. We've kind of addressed some of the points above, but the fact that they, wouldn't have bodily functions, if they're taking in some form of energy, they are required to excrete the waste products from this energy. They have to have a way of expelling waste. Although it may not be frequent, which is how this myth probably started, they probably still do need to use the bathroom. 6. Vampires eat infrequently. True. Having a lower metabolism, as cited above, they wouldn't need to eat as often in order to gain their nutrients. 7. Vampires don't show up in pictures. That is false. This is a religious thing that has to do with a lack of their souls, But animals also don't have souls, and they show up in pictures just fine. While we're at it, of course, crosses don't repel them, because again, that goes back to the religious thing. And on a side note, in one of these fantasy worlds where religion repels vampires, if they created their own religion, would they promptly become allergic to it? 8. Vampires can turn invisible. Very false. Do you know how hard it is to use mirrors in physics to make things invisible? It's really hard, and you can only make them invisible from one specific angle. Now try doing that from all angles all the time. There is not a way. Now, let's talk about diet. Why does eating blood work for vampires? Well, blood contains many things that could be useful to them, such as glucose, amino acid, vitamins, and nutrients, as well as the globulin proteins themselves that carry oxygen, break down, and use for other things. But breaking down amino acids is a lot more difficult. So, vampires would have to have special adaptations for it in order to be able to use them efficiently. Interestingly, I think vampires might end up evolving a 4-chambered stomach like ruminids, like, grass eaters, and what that would essentially do is allow them to filter out different things at different stages. So for instance, maybe the first chamber of the stomach would filter out the glucose, the second would filter out the amino acids, and so on and so forth. And the last chamber would probably be a salt bath, because that is what's required to break down the globulin proteins. So how exactly do all of these changes and adaptations happen? Well, I think pleiotropy, which is when one gene affects multiple traits and creates a cascade that allows other genes and other traits to change. So one gene, let's just say, for example, this is not a real example, but you have one gene that affects your nose shape and also affects your hair color. That would be an example of pleiotropy. So you have this one gene that affects all of these other traits. When you think about vampire evolution, you don't need to have several different things evolving in different steps. If they got the vampire gene, that essentially means that they have it from the beginning. And so then the question remains, how does it spread? Now, I think that it spreads via virus, but because of all of the physiological changes, your mother would need to get the virus early in your development. Now, how does this work? Viruses can inject their RNA or DNA into your cells and even fuse with the human genome and take some of your DNA as well. So, while it is unlikely, it is entirely possible that your genetic code could be modified just enough that you would create a gene that is pleiotropic, causing a cascade effect. Now we have to think about evolution. And the advantages, of course, your life will be much, much longer, you're more resilient, and you need to feed less frequently. But if we're talking about evolution, we also have to talk about how humans might contribute to the evolutionary arms race. If the prey has an adaptation to avoid the predator will just evolve something better, and which is how we get poisoned, and we get all these really weird things in the animal kingdom. Humans would evolve a countermeasure to the vampires. So what would they evolve? That's right, I'm talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And if you think about the magic surrounding that system, she herself may not be magical. She doesn't need to be. What's magical is the system that is preventing other slayers from manifesting their powers. So, in practical, human worlds, I think that, it would evolve for humans to be faster and stronger in order to beat the vampires. So, we have to also think about why it's all women. Now, I think that the Slayer gene may require 2 X chromosomes, which means that most guys would not be able to be slayers and to evolve this gene unless they had Klinefelter syndrome, which means you have 2 X chromosomes and 1 Y chromosome and manifest as a guy. So essentially, you have 2 X chromosomes, and that is how slayers pass on their genes and become an evolutionary adaptation to fight vampires. I think that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below, and thanks for watching.